Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Once again, it is story time. Growing up in the 1970s, I spent a lot of time going to the movies. Now let me ask you, was there a particular summer where you felt like you spent the entire summer at the movies? Well, for me, it was summer of 1979. Now, being out of school, besides going swimming, going to the movies was a big deal. And we had a friend who happened to be 17 years old, which meant we got to get into all the R-rated movies. Yeah, more about that later on. Anyway, here's my list of movies that I saw in the summer of 1979, some real stinkers, and some box office champs. Here they are in this order.
Mad Max, the maximum force of the future.
Mad Max. A friend of mine convinced me to go see this new movie called Mad Max. It was an Australian film, and he was really into cars and car chases, so I thought, sure, why not? I didn't know who Mel Gibson was at the time, but just the opening scenes had us hooked from the very start. Directed by George Miller on a budget of $400,000 and returning a whopping $100 million at the box office. This 6-week shoot turned this movie into cinematic box office gold, not only changing the lives of Miller, but Gibson as well. This film often gets credited to opening the door for the Australian film market to worldwide audiences. For whatever reason, Mad Max struck a chord with audiences, and before long, everyone would know who Mel Gibson was. Next up are 3 stinkers. So we'll start from fun bad to just bad to what the heck did I just watch? The Villain, also known in the UK and Australia as Cactus Jack. Kirk Douglas, Anne Margaret, and Arnold Schwarzenegger star in this Warner Brothers cartoon of a movie, oddly enough, directed by Hal Needham. Throwing in a bunch of comedians and former Western movie stars like Strother Martin, Jack Elam, Mel Tillis, Ruth Buzzy, Foster Brooks, for those of you who remember him, and dear old Uncle Arthur, Paul Lynde as Nervous Elk, the Indian chief. It is essentially a Roadrunner cartoon in live action, with Douglas as the coyote. As one reviewer stated, Anne Margaret spends the entire film attempting to seduce Arnold, who plays handsome stranger who keeps running off to gather firewood. It gets embarrassing. Did you see it? Like it? I'm still on the fence. But in all fairness, I haven't seen it since I saw it in the theater in 1979. The Brood. David Cronenberg enters the horror movie genre with what he calls his version of Kramer vs. Kramer, but more realistic. Starring Oliver Reed and Samantha Agar, it involves mental treatments for a woman who is deeply disturbed, and in a custody battle with her husband for their daughter. However, in this bizarre treatment, Reed calls psychoplasmics, Agar begins birthing several deformed dwarfs, essentially the Brood. This was one of those movies that by the time you got to the ending, you were like, huh? Fun fact, The Brood was Howard Shore's first film score. And then there's Prophecy. That's right, the one with the big giant mutant bear. Centered around a group of EPA inspectors investigating the waters around a paper mill and logging company where mercury is discovered, and anything coming into contact with the water is being disturbingly affected. Hence, we get the monster of our movie, which is based on an ancient Indian legend. Starring Robert Foxworth, Talia Shire, Armand Assante, and Richard A. Dysart. It becomes a fight for survival as the stranded group try to escape the forest. This was one of those cases where, thank goodness, my date was better than the movie. Next up, The Muppet Movie. Don't judge me. All of us growing up in the 70s were huge fans of The Muppet Show. It became one of those shows where movie stars were lining up to be guests, and it certainly showed with a number of movie cameo appearances. For those who don't know the plot, Kermit, singing happily in his swamp, is discovered by a Hollywood agent played by Dom DeLuise, and encourages him to go to Hollywood and become a movie star.
I'm on my way to Hollywood. Hollywood?
Kermit agrees and begins a Wizard of Oz kind of road trip where he meets new friends and enemies along the way on his trek to stardom. And of course, all the celebrities. My friend wanted to see this movie because he was a huge fan of Steve Martin, and I never missed the show on Sunday nights. So aside from Charles Durning being the main villain, Doc Hopper, we also have Dom DeLuise, James Coburn, Madeline Kahn, Carol Kane, Telly Savalas, Paul Williams, Milton Berle, Elliot Gould, Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy, Bob Hope, Richard Pryor, Steve Martin, Mel Brooks, Cloris Leachman, and Orson Welles. On a budget of $8 million, the Muppet Movie raked in $65.2 million at the box office. Not bad for a bunch of guys who started out on Sesame Street. Alien. This is one of my favorite all-time movies. With a great cast of Tom Skerritt, Yaphet Kotto, Sigourney Weaver, Veronica Cartwright, Ian Holm, Harry Dean Stanton, and John Hurt, the film for me just kept such a great slow tension until it unleashed itself in that disgusting facehugger. The plot: a commercial space freighter returning to Earth receives a signal from a nearby planet, and the crew is awoken from their cryo-slumber to investigate. Once things go wrong, they go wrong in the worst way possible. And soon something is on board and is hunting them. With nowhere to go, the crew must find a way to stop the alien. While Ridley Scott kept getting harped at by the producers for going over budget, which was $11 million, and that was a lot of cash in 1979, the film returned $187 million at the box office. Instantly, producers could smell sequels. This was a great summer movie. Dracula. Dracula starring Frank Langella. For the first time in cinema history, the Dracula story takes a more romantic approach against the classic themes of fangs and rubber bats dangling on wires. Director John Badham originally wanted to shoot the film in black and white, but Universal said no. But this was a great cast of Frank Langella in the title role, Donald Pleasance as Dr. Seward, Kate Nelligan as Lucy, Trevor Eve as Jonathan Harker, Jan Francis as Mina, and Laurence Olivier as Dr. Van Helsing. And of course, we cannot forget the amazing film score by the one and only John Williams. I remember the teaser trailer saying, "Dracula, a love story." I thought, okay. In fact, I might have seen the trailer when I saw Alien. It is my favorite Dracula movie. By the way, Shout Factory in 2019 released it on Blu-ray, and it's said to have released the full-color version not seen since the original theatrical run, but also the muted color tones on a separate disc for those interested in seeing both. So, what else do you do during the summer when you're going to the movies? You go see a Bond film. For the longest time, I remember Bond films getting released during the summer, cashing in on all of us fans who were out of school. Moonraker, which is probably one of the worst of the Roger Moore Bonds, as if you watch it closely, it's really just one long commercial. Everywhere, there's ads for everything, from 7-Up, British Airways, Marlboro cigarettes, etc. Everywhere, there's an ad. But it's a guilty pleasure for me. Hugo Drax, played by Michael Lonsdale, is the man behind the Moonrakers, which are space shuttles, and one goes missing. Bond is called in to investigate, and as always, is sent around the world to exotic locations with as many exotic ladies as well. But Bond gets out of this world, and with his American counterpart, Dr. Holly Goodhead, no, you didn't hear that wrong, Ian Fleming's sense of misogynistic humor at play. They go after Drax into space. There we are treated to a virtual repeat of the big fight from The Spy Who Loved Me, only with space lasers. Remember, Star Wars was only 2 years old at this time. It is obviously not one of the best Bond films, but it was still worth going to for my summer at the theater. The Amityville Horror. Okay, so this one was a big deal for me. I had read the book just a year or two prior, and yeah, it did scare me. So the movie was really anticipated. Now this is where our 17-year-old friend Randy came into the picture. He was able to get us into all the R-rated movies that we wanted. Cast of James Brolin, Margot Kidder, Rod Steiger, and Murray Hamilton. It does its best to follow the storyline of the 28 days the Letts family endured in the house from hell. A budget of $4.7 million turned into a cash cow of $86.4 million at the box office, and a string of the worst sequels ever in cinema history. 20 of them, in fact, right down to Amityville Cop in 2021. There was a big budget reboot with Ryan Reynolds in 2005, and that one wasn't too bad. And finally, for my last film. It's a film that came out in 1974, but it was getting a re-release for the first time in my area, and thanks once again to my friend Randy, I got to see Blazing Saddles. There's so much to be said about this classic Western spoof. It was Mel Brooks at his best, with a great cast of Cleavon Little, Gene Wilder, Harvey Korman, Madeline Kahn, Slim Pickens,
And tell him that I said, ow!
and Alex Karras as Mongo.
Hey, you can't park that animal over there. It's illegal.
Blazing Saddles pulls no punches, as you just saw. From every classic joke and gag to the very first time farting was done in movies. And of course, a big fight at the end, which makes every classic comedy classic. Well, gang, that's my summer in the cinema for the year 1979. How was your summer at the movies? Which summer do you remember spending more time going to the cinema than any other? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the movies.
Excuse me while I whip this out.